1. A feeling of being fed up with life or lack of meaning. In psychiatry, hopelessness is often considered one of the core symptoms of depressive disorders. It is different from temporary sadness in that this feeling is long-lasting, persistent, and not positively affected by external factors. This is manifested in manifestations such as repeated thoughts about life is meaningless, lack of motivation, no longer interested in any activities, reduced ability to plan for the future, no personal goals. In severe cases, thoughts of self-harm or suicide appear. Frequently feeling hopeless or seeing life as useless, self as worthless, will disrupt neurotransmitters, reducing the levels of serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline in the brain related to regulating positive emotions and mental energy. In addition, the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal, is overactive. Prolonged cortisol increases damage to the hippocampus, the center of memory and learning, contributing to increased feelings of hopelessness. Fluctuating hormones such as estrogen and testosterone, especially during puberty and premenopause, can exacerbate negative emotions. Depressed people tend to focus on the negative, exaggerate failures, and ignore successes. They always condemn themselves, thinking that they are useless and unworthy of love. Violence, abuse, and repeated failures in relationships can trigger the hopeless emotional pattern. The overly high standards of success from family, school, and social networks create a feeling of never being good enough. When feelings of hopelessness persist and there is no way out, the risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors increases. 2. Frequent self-blame and criticism of one's appearance. Self-blame is the tendency to automatically attribute every problem, failure, or shortcoming to oneself. Body-shaming self-criticism involves disparaging one's own value through negative judgments about one's body, face, or figure. This manifests as persistent internal statements such as, "I'm so ugly," "Why can't I look like everyone else?" or "Everything bad is my fault." Individuals frequently compare themselves to others and continually feel inferior and worthless. A clear loss of confidence emerges in their avoidance of social interactions, reluctance to participate in group activities, or hesitation to be photographed. As personal confidence erodes, the burden of self-criticism only intensifies. Each time they look in the mirror, their brain's stress network is activated, making the belief, "I'm worthless," feel all the more convincing. Harsh self-judgment about one's body can trigger the onset of anorexia nervosa, bulimia, or binge eating disorder, as young people attempt to control their weight as a form of self-punishment. The ongoing cycle of self-blame steadily erodes self-esteem, heightening the risk of mood disorders, major depression, or social anxiety disorder. A lack of confidence drives individuals to withdraw from social engagement, impairing their interpersonal skills and deepening their sense of isolation. The habit of self-blame and body-shaming self-criticism is not a transient emotional state, but a warning sign of cognitive distortion, chronic neural stress, and overwhelming social pressure. 3. Liking to be alone but fearing loneliness. Preferring isolation yet fearing loneliness represents a complex internal conflict that reflects an imbalance in emotion regulation and the basic need for social connection. Isolation is characterized by withdrawing from social interactions, minimizing communication, and retreating into one's inner world. Loneliness, by contrast, is the feeling of emptiness and the lack of a deep bond with others, even when surrounded by people. Typical manifestations include routinely avoiding gatherings, meetups with friends or colleagues, spending the majority of one's time alone, reading, watching movies, gaming, experiencing anxiety and unease when forced into social situations, simultaneously enduring a pervasive sense of emptiness, thinking no one understands me, and feeling emotionally unsafe. Neurobiologically, this pattern reflects emotion dysregulation. The prefrontal cortex, which normally helps modulate social impulses, functions suboptimally, failing to dampen negative emotions in group settings. The autonomic nervous system responds with heightened fight-or-flight activation during social contact. Rapid heartbeat, sweating, shallow breathing, driving further avoidance. Deficient oxytocin, the bonding hormone, undermines trust and safety in interpersonal encounters, while unstable serotonin levels contribute to persistent social anxiety and loneliness. From an attachment theory perspective, an avoidant attachment style formed in early childhood can foster an excessive preference for independence, even as a deeper yearning for care and understanding remains unmet. Cognitive distortions, such as "I was rejected before, so I will be rejected again," fuel self-withdrawal, while the belief that others hold negative judgments intensifies hesitancy to engage. In the short term, isolation serves as a defensive strategy to avoid emotional harm, but over time it exacerbates feelings of solitude and emptiness. Culturally, societies that valorize self-reliance and view asking for help as weakness further stigmatize those who retreat, leaving them feeling outdated when they attempt to seek support. Left unaddressed, this dynamic leads to long-term consequences: loss of community connectedness, a sense of invisibility, and eventually the emergence of profoundly negative thoughts about life itself. 4. Experiencing mood swings. Mood lability is intense shifts in emotional state that are disproportionate to triggering events, encompassing both euphoric or irritable highs and depressed or tearful lows. Clinically, it presents as sudden surges of energy, excessive talking, and mild hypomanic or manic behavior, followed by deep sadness, loss of motivation, tearfulness, or irritability for no clear reason, with swings between these poles occurring over hours or days. Biologically, several mechanisms contribute. Hypothyroidism, low T3 and T4, slows metabolism, leading to fatigue, depression, and increased emotional sensitivity. Hyperthyroidism, excess thyroid hormone, triggers heightened arousal, anxiety, irritability, and tremors, often alternating with fatigue, appetite loss, and insomnia. Abnormal cortisol fluctuations directly affect the hypothalamus and amygdala, destabilizing emotion regulation. Psychiatric genetics research links polymorphisms in serotonin and dopamine and transporter genes to increase sensitivity to mood swings. Psychologically, mood lability often sits on a bipolar spectrum. Individuals cycle between hypomanic or manic episodes and depressive episodes. In milder forms, they may function relatively normally but still experience intense emotional volatility. Cognitively, those prone to mood swings tend to adopt all-or-nothing thinking, viewing a single mistake as total failure, which can plunge them into depressive states. Socially, if they cannot share their struggles, they feel isolated and misunderstood, deepening depressive episodes. Without intervention, mood lability can evolve into full-blown bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. Chronic stress, sleep disruption, and erratic eating patterns further increase the risk of metabolic, cardiovascular, and immune dysfunction. In severe cases, it may progress to a serious psychiatric disorder. 5. Exaggerated startle response. An exaggerated startle response is a whole-body jolt or intense muscle spasm, triggered by even the slightest noise or movement despite no real threat being present. It reflects a state of chronic neural tension where the brain remains locked onto the edges of the environment, scanning relentlessly for danger, even in harmless stimuli, and overreacting. The amygdala, the brain's fear-processing hub, becomes hypersensitive after trauma, lowering its activation threshold and amplifying the startle reflex. Meanwhile, the sympathetic fight-or-flight system is chronically engaged. Your heart races, blood pressure spikes, and muscles tense, primed to react instantaneously. Following a traumatic event, such as violence or an accident, your internal alarm system learns that even the faintest cue might signal danger. As a result, trauma survivors live in a state of perpetual awake asleep, never fully at rest. Sounds or movements associated with past suffering trigger fear memories and reflexes, much like Pavlovian conditioning. On a community level, collective traumas, war, natural disasters, domestic violence don't just wound individuals. They ripple through society, raising everyone's vigilance. Yet when an exaggerated startle is dismissed as weakness or hallucination, sufferers often hide their symptoms and miss out on timely support, cementing their hypervigilant state. Over time, this pattern exacts a heavy toll. Deep, restorative sleep becomes impossible as you wake at every noise. A constant undercurrent of anxiety drains your mental resilience, and your brain wastes precious energy on vigilance, undermining your productivity and learning capacity. 6. Loss of appetite or overeating. When stress becomes chronic, ghrelin, the hunger hormone, can surge, creating false hunger signals that drive overeating. Conversely, prolonged stress may induce leptin resistance, the breakdown of the satiety hormone, so the brain never registers that you've had enough and continues to trigger eating. A hyperactive HPA axis elevates cortisol levels, which both raises blood glucose and promotes fat storage while simultaneously stimulating the hypothalamic feeding centers, further encouraging excessive food intake. In some individuals, however, high cortisol can suppress appetite and lead to reduced food consumption. Serotonin deficiency also contributes to disordered eating, since serotonin regulates mood and carbohydrate cravings. Meanwhile, the brain's reward pathways can become overstimulated by sugary or starchy foods, fostering a pattern of eating for pleasure rather than nourishment. Many people turn to food as an emotional coping mechanism, a form of psychological medicine, to relieve sadness, anxiety, or anger. So every craving becomes an attempt to discharge negative emotions. Taken together, these phenomena illustrate that both under- and overeating are symptoms of a complex interplay between neural and endocrine dysregulation, cognitive distortions, and social pressures. 7. Loss of time awareness. Loss of time awareness is the inability to distinguish day from night or to sense the passage of time, morning, evening, week, month, and presents with signs such as not knowing what day of the week or date it is. Feeling like morning feels the same as evening, with every sleep period indistinguishable. Sleeping all day and staying awake all night without noticing anything unusual. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, in the hypothalamus serves as our master biological clock, receiving light signals through the eyes to regulate the sleep-wake cycle. Severe stress or prolonged depression can reduce SCN sensitivity, preventing the body from synchronizing to a 24-hour rhythm. Melatonin, the hormone produced at night to induce sleep, can be released at the wrong times under intense stress or serious mood disturbances, leading to erratic sleep patterns. Damage to the vestibular system and entorhinal cortex, areas involved in encoding temporal context in memory, can occur with chronic stress. Reduced entorhinal volume impairs the brain's ability to sequence events, blurring one's sense of past and present timeframes. Individuals in a severe depressive episode often experience time slowing, where minutes feel like hours, or time speeding, where days pass in a blur, both of which disrupt their connection to the here and now. As a psychological defense against overwhelming stress, the brain may dissociate time from experience, causing sufferers to literally lose track of days and months. Environmental factors exacerbate this. Working long hours in windowless spaces with little natural light and no fixed schedule can desynchronize the circadian clock. Irregular routines, pulling night shifts, all-night study sessions, accumulate stress and further scramble the body's internal clock. In cultures that valorize sleep deprivation as high productivity, people consciously override their natural rhythms, ultimately losing the concept of day versus night. Loss of time awareness is a grave warning sign that biological rhythms, cognitive processes, and environmental demands are acutely misaligned and in conflict. 8. Disturbed dreams and frequent nightmares. Dream disturbances encompass somnambulism, sleepwalking, somniloquy, sleep talking, and other abnormal dreams that disrupt normal sleep cycles. Recurrent nightmares are repeated, terrifying dreams that provoke sudden awakenings and make it difficult to return to sleep. These conditions manifest as waking in the middle of the night feeling disoriented, heart racing, and drenched in sweat. Pre-sleep anxiety, a profound fear of reliving distressing dream imagery. Daytime fatigue, reduced concentration, and irritability. Nightmares primarily occur during the REM, rapid eye movement phase, when the brain processes emotion. Psychological trauma can increase REM frequency or disrupt transitions between REM and non-REM sleep, resulting in haunting dreams. An overactivated amygdala magnifies fear responses in dreams, while trauma-impaired hippocampal circuits, responsible for memory consolidation, blend painful memories into dream content. Chronic stress keeps cortisol levels elevated at night, interfering with melatonin production and REM regulation, further perpetuating nightmares. The brain attempts to process traumatic experiences through dreaming. When overloaded, it replays distressing images as recurrent nightmares. Individuals with high stress or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, often ruminate on frightening thoughts before sleep, heightening the likelihood of nightmare onset. A pervasive sense of not deserving peace can lead the brain to punish the sleeper with terrifying dreams, perpetuating a vicious cycle of fear and unrest. Lifestyle factors, extended work hours, excessive screen time before bed, and academic or work pressures further fragment sleep and amplify nightmare frequency. Dream disturbances and frequent nightmares are critical warning signs that the brain's capacity to process memories and regulate emotion has been overwhelmed. Don't underestimate the signs I've just mentioned in this video. They can be very dangerous for you.